to another edition. We are so glad to have you. Jake Lapin here, along with my usual co-host, Julian McKenzie. Julian, how's it going?
Life's going okay, Jake. Life is going just fine. But I'm exceptionally happy today.
Julian, that's great to hear. And what's even better is that we have a special guest with us for the first time, as you can see on the lower third. Former Syracuse classmate and Masson digital intern, Matt D'Ambrosi. Matt, did I get that title right?
I'll take it. Works for me. Good enough for government work, as they say.
Good enough. All right, Matt.
Government work.
First of all, how's it going, man? How are you doing down there in Baltimore?
It's going well, man. The office is in the warehouse at Camden Yards. I know a ballpark you've been itching to get to. Now that you're in New York, it should be feasible. But it's fantastic. We're in the web studio, so basically just helping MassonSports.com generate content for the website, for their Twitter, their Instagram. They started this new show called Masson All Access, which is kind of a behind-the-scenes look at just kind of some of the behind-the-scenes elements, what goes into the players and just some funny segments and stuff like that. And Masson is actually the network. They do the Orioles, even though we're at Camden Yards. They have the TV rights to the Orioles and the Washington Nationals. So it just happens to be housed, MassonSports.com, in Camden Yards, but we do just as much national stuff and Nationals coverage.
Have you had the opportunity to meet any of the Orioles players by chance? I mean, obviously you're in their basement, so you get to hang around there, maybe get to do some cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Today I was at a press conference with Buck Showalter. I'm right there. I could wave and he'd see me. I interviewed Chris Davis for a package. Adam Jones came in studio the one day I wasn't there. That's how life works. Jackie and Kelsey actually got to meet him, but it is a phenomenal platform because the access is unreal. I'm in the warehouse. You take the elevator down to the first floor. I've been in the elevator twice with Dan Duquette. One's very close to the trade deadline. He had the earphones in. I won't say what he was talking about here on the World Wide Web, but it's been great. Yeah, interviewed Chris Davis, Adam Jones, Jonathan Scope, Manny Machado. Been seeing those guys out on the field hitting BP, the whole nine, man. It's been an unreal experience so far.
Sounds really fun, man.
It is. It absolutely is. We've gotten to do a few packages too. Mike Bordick, a former Oriole, who's now a broadcaster with the network, got to interview him for a piece. Just it's great, man. It's baseball, and you're right there. You feel very much in it.
We'll definitely be talking a lot about the Orioles and Nationals in this show, considering it is our MLB trade deadline aftermath show. The deadline, of course, was this past Monday. Some teams made the big deals we expected. Other teams came out of left field, like the Orioles. We'll get to that in a second. And some teams did absolutely nothing. Unfortunately, we're going to have to get to that too. I think you guys both know what team I'm talking about. But since we have you, Matt, let's start with the Orioles. They decided to hang on tight to Zach Britton. Why exactly did that happen?
There was so much talk. I mean, it was nonstop with, are they buyers, are they sellers? And especially, I mean, it was going as early back when the Cubs got Quintana. People were saying, well, the Cubs were able to do that because they had prospects to give up. And people were saying, well, even if the Orioles wanted to make that kind of move, they don't have enough in the farm system to get something in return. Look, Dan Duquette just a few days ago came out and he said he likes the squad. He thinks they can win. He said that he's content with the guys he got. They were fielding offers for Britton and stuff like that. But the AL East, it's tight. I mean, the Sox and the Yankees are at the top, but the Orioles have been playing good baseball. They're 3.5 back of the wild card. They were heading into the game tonight against the Royals. And I'm assuming he didn't get an offer on Britton or, some other players that were in the mix. I'm assuming, the reason why nobody moved is because he didn't get something that he felt was a big enough bang for his buck on Britton.
I read somewhere that they were very close to a deal with the Astros for Zach Britton. And at the last second, it seems like the owner kind of had last say on this deal. How true is that?
That's information that goes above my pay grade. Generally speaking, as an Orioles fan, though, yep, Mr. Angelos, the owner of the Orioles, from what I've heard and gathered, he normally has the say on all major decisions when it comes to Britton. The Astros, I don't know. I mean, I'll punt the question back to you. Any thoughts on what the offer was?
It's considering that the Astros ended up getting nothing done, it seems like they were holding on pretty darn tight to their top prospects. That being said, we'll get into the nuances of why I think the Astros ended up not making any big deals in a second. I want to stay with our focus here in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And we'll also get to some more Baltimore owners intervening, perhaps when they shouldn't, but that's later in the show. Julian, I want to get your thoughts on what the Orioles have done, or what they did do, I guess, on Monday.
Kind of curious about the fact that they still opted to go for it. I mean, you talk about how the AL East is pretty stacked. And, I mean, obviously the Red Sox and the Yankees, they're kind of leading that division. As of now, I mean, the Orioles, last I checked, they were winning their game against the Royals. They're 6 games back in the AL East. Still a lot of racetrack to be run in this division. I don't know if they were just too far out, and maybe just dealing away Zach Britton, maybe getting some kind of piece back to try to contend may have worked out. But keeping Britton may end up benefiting them in the long run here. I mean, I don't know. I was kind of surprised that Britton did not end up going. Excuse me for my mouth. Not getting out the English language. My bad.
It's interesting because Baltimore was kind of lower in the pack about a couple weeks ago when all this trade deadline talk goes on. But like Matt said, they've been playing a lot better lately. That rotation that they've gotten nothing from all year has suddenly stepped up, and it was confusing to me, Matt, when they traded for Jeremy Hellickson, because I thought the Orioles would at least stand pat, if not be sellers. It turns out they made a very minor buy, but a buy nonetheless.
A buy nonetheless, and you mentioned it, the staff's just, quite frankly, been garbage. But on the uptick, Kevin Gausman had a great second half last year. The discussion was, could he do it again? And he has. He's been great so far, minus a poor start right after the All-Star break against the Cubs. But they got quality innings from Bundy. They've gotten quality innings from Ubaldo after the break, which is something they weren't able to get before. You add Hellickson. I know he comes from the Phillies, but he's a guy that spent some time with Tampa. He knows Camden Yards. He's pitched in the AL East before. He's a veteran arm. I actually think he was Rookie of the Year when he came into the league. I don't know if you can check me on that or not.
Yeah, he was.
But, like you said, a minor move, but a minor move in the grand scheme amongst the sea of moves that were made. But for a team like the Orioles, it's a pretty significant move, given the situation with the bullpen, or with the starters, rather, the starting rotation, not getting much out of Wade Miley, Ubaldo struggling. I think it's a move that it shows that they were willing to make some deal, even if it wasn't the biggest deal in the world. It wasn't going to shake anybody's head. That they were still out there looking. They also got Tim Beckham, and I think it's going to play well for him.
Yeah, Hellickson actually making his Orioles debut tonight. Through 5 scoreless, I believe. We can check in on that game later. I want to switch things over to the Nationals now, the other side of Masson, if you will. It seems like their focus at the deadline was pretty clear, and that's the bullpen, Matt.
It was pretty clear, and I've gone back and forth on how I feel about it. Mike Rizzo went out, got 3 arms. He started early, obviously getting Doolittle and getting Madsen. But I heard yesterday that they still don't know who's going to close for them, and it makes sense. Why make the decision now? You brought in 3 guys, Brandon Kinsler from the Twins too. But none of them really true closers in the sense of having been in that position their whole career. Kinsler really, last year he had 17 saves for the Twins. It was the first time recording a save. This year he's got 28 saves. He's blown 4, so he's, I don't know, maybe the Orioles the Nationals were able to get him at a time where he's in that role. Doolittle, Madsen was on those teams with the Phillies, 2008, 2009, those World Series teams. So he's a veteran arm. He's played the closer role before. Doolittle has really once in his career. He had 1 season where he had like 22 saves. But I think it was kind of a by committee move. I think Mike Rizzo said, let's bring in 3 guys that I think are good. We got enough time to plug them in. So far, Doolittle's got 4 saves. He's 4 for 4. And I think they're just going to kind of rotate them and see who does well before they name anybody to really sure it up. But yeah, I don't think it was a huge splash. I think it's kind of like the by committee approach.
Yeah, like you said, no one who's like a standout closer, but it's just a matter of depth, and they brought it in. Madsen and Doolittle, both guys who have shown that they can pitch in big roles, including in the postseason, and now Kinsler as well. the actual deadline acquisition. Look, we can't really mess around here. The Nationals have a pretty clear situation where they have underachieved, yet to get past the first round for a while now, despite being one of the best teams in baseball over the past 5 or 6 years. Now you have guys like Bryce Harper who could be on their way out eventually. They have to make noise this year. The bullpen was the weakest in the National League, I believe, in terms of ERA, so they went out and addressed what they had to do, and I respect it. Julian, what did you think about the Nationals' deadline strategy?
I'm with you on that. We've looked at this team over the last few years. They have the guy in Bryce Harper at bat. They have a guy at pitching with guys like Max Scherzer. Their bullpen has seemed to have been the thing that lets them down. I don't mind their move at all getting Brandon Kinsler. This is a guy who doesn't cost that much. Prorated salary at $1 million this year, 28 saves. I agree with Matt with the whole going by committee thing. You get yourself some depth, get yourself some arms. If one guy doesn't work out, you can still go out and get another guy. You can still have another guy who you got who could eventually fill that role of closer. But the Nationals get a good grade in my eyes for at least fulfilling that need of a decent bullpen. You can't go into a postseason like this and not address a need like that, where year in, year out, that seems to be your weak link. They have the hitting, they have the pitching, the starting pitching at least. No reason why they couldn't go out and get their bullpen. That being said, and we'll talk about this a little later, is it going to be enough to, maybe get out the first round is one thing, but is it going to be enough to bypass another team that could be in that particular spot? And I think I know which team we're thinking of.
Yeah, we'll get to them in a second. Look, the Nationals lineup, like you said, is absolutely stacked. They've even been dealing with a few injuries and have not skipped a beat. Some Syracuse guys that we got to cover over the past year. Wilmer Defoe getting every day at short right now. Goodwin playing in center. The Nationals lineup is certainly not their issue. I want to talk about starting pitching for a second because clearly they have, I think, who's the Cy Young favorite in Max Scherzer. Gio Gonzalez was a few outs away from a no-hitter the other night. Matt, do you have any update on Scherzer leaving the game the other day with that neck issue?
I was in the web studio when it happened. I have not followed up on it. What was it? The neck? Is that what the reports are? He hit the homer before, and they were thinking. They were trying to see if he had aggravated it during the swing with the neck. He walked off, and as he walked off the field, it's red on the back. His neck's a little discolored, but I haven't heard any updates or anything official, no.
Yeah, I heard it was neck spasms. He's going to see a chiropractor and hopes to pitch in his next start, so it doesn't sound like anything too serious. Heck, I'd blame it on the home run, too, if I ever hit a home run, which I never did, unfortunately. But as long as he's healthy, do you think this bullpen depth is enough for them to actually get out of the first round this year?
I think it's the only real move they had to make. You've touched on it. I mean, dude, they're getting hits from everywhere. Goodwin's going deep. Defoe. I mean, and you mentioned it, Trey Turner and Jason Worth aren't even in the lineup. And Dusty Baker said that. He was like, he was talking about where he's batting Rendon after Murphy and this and that. And he's like, and to be honest with you, I don't even have a normal lineup. I don't even got Trey Turner. I don't even got Jason Worth. So they're getting offensive production from everywhere, and not just minor offensive production. They're getting quality production from Goodwin and Defoe, guys like that. They got the starting pitching. Like you said, Gio almost had the no-no. You got Max Scherzer. You got Strasburg, who should be coming back. The only thing that is the question mark, right, was the bullpen. And I think they went out, and I think they did the best they could. I think they got 3 guys. You touched on it before, 3 guys that are good enough, and you're gonna ride it out, and you're gonna see who can – the Nationals will be able to get you the lead, and they'll be able to get it, and it's just about some guy being able to come in the 8th and 9th and sew it up and put a bow on it. That's really the only thing that's going to prevent them from not being able to advance. And I think they went out and addressed it as best they could.
In theory, with the lineup that they have, especially if they get a lot of those guys coming back, this should be the year the Nationals should be at least able to get out of the first round.
I absolutely think so. I think just having the opportunity to kind of have that front row seat to watching them play. They got heading into tonight. They had a 13-game lead in the NL East. They're a real fun team to watch, man. They're a real fun team to watch, and I think they're really good. They got Dusty Baker. They got a guy that's a good season manager, good season skipper in the dugout for him. I think we're holding off on the Dodgers talk. I think it's really the only team in the NL I see being able to stop them.
Yeah, let's get on to the Dodgers because clearly these are the guys that everyone is playing catch up to. And they go out and get Yu Darvish. I mean, can anyone stop these guys in the National League?
Pretty much the only team that can stop the LA Dodgers is themselves right now. They are literally the head and shoulders above everybody. I know I tried to make that bold prediction that they'd somehow, kind of trip over themselves and stumble before the end of the year. Knock on wood, I don't think that's going to happen from here on out. But the craziest thing about this whole Yu Darvish story is the last minute of it. You may have been following Twitter for all the trades and all of the different, brouhahas that were going on minutes before the deadline. Justin Verlander tweets out that photo in front of his locker stall saying, "Hey, it's minutes before deadline. I'm still here." Yu Darvish gets in on the fun with 10 minutes left to go, and all of a sudden he ends up getting traded. I was listening in on on an interview with Alex Anthopoulos, former Blue Jays general manager, now the VP of baseball operations in LA. Up to about 30 minutes before the deadline, they thought, you know what, Yu Darvish, there's nothing kicking there. And with about 15 minutes to go, something just clicked, and all of a sudden, Yu Darvish is a member of the LA Dodgers. Is a guy who I understand he hasn't had that great of starts his last few outings out, but this is a guy who I think will do just fine as a number 2 guy. I know Clayton Kershaw is on the mend right now. He'll come back, and I think he'll be back to form. I think he'll be fine, but that's some pretty decent insurance to have. Darvish gets himself a better team in front of him to pitch for. That's a really solid 1-2 punch of Kershaw and Darvish, and obviously Alex Wood and Rich Hill also there as well. A solid rotation for the Dodgers. The only team that can stop them at this point, if not the Cubs, just themselves. Something disastrous has to happen. Maybe Clayton Kershaw doesn't recover well when he returns from injury. That's the biggest thing I can think of.
Matt, what do you think about the Dodgers going out and getting Yu Darvish?
I think it's a bold, strong statement that they're all in. I heard some speculation that maybe it's an insurance policy on Kershaw. Look, regardless what you're talking about is as a staff, you're talking about they got the lowest ERA in the National League as a team. They've allowed the fewest hits in the National League, the fewest earned runs, the fewest homers allowed. They walked the fewest batters as a pitching staff. They got a good enough offense, and they got lethal pitching. And then you talk about Jansen coming in and closing things up on that end. Look, even without Kershaw, you got Maeda, you got Hill, you got Wood, you got Ryu, all guys that have ERAs below 4. That's without Clayton Kershaw. You toss Kershaw in the mix, I don't know what more you could ask for. They went out and they said, let's get Darvish. Why not?
Yeah, you think about what the Dodgers have done this year. It's historically good, and the fact that they're doing it with young guys like Bellinger and Seager, and they've been without Adrian Gonzalez for so long. You said it best, Matt. They are all in, and I think that was the only choice they had was to go all in. When you're at 75 wins this early into the season, you're 10 games ahead of any other team in baseball. Not to mention that they've been to the NLCS a number of times over the past handful of years and could never quite get there. They are all in, and I'm all in with them. I think the Dodgers finally get into the World Series this year, first time since 1988, and I don't think anyone even gives them a minor scare. So long as Kershaw comes back healthy, I know he's had some playoff struggles here and there, but I think he proved last year that he can get it done. Now they have Darvish right behind him. And that's if he was an insurance policy, that is one hell of an insurance policy. I don't see anyone messing with the Dodgers, at least in the National League, as it stands right now.
So not the Chicago Cubs, who've won 8 of their last 10 and obviously are the reigning champions, and they're starting to look like the Cubs we've been waiting for a good – they're starting to look like the Cubs we've been looking for all year. The Nationals, who get better in the bullpen, and we're looking at them as a team to get out of the first round this year. Maybe they get a little tougher deal if they face off against the Dodgers, but not those two teams. I mean, remember, this is the baseball playoffs. Anything could happen. And, we haven't seen the Dodgers be as good as they've been in a long time, but I've seen, a really good Dodgers team go up, and it looks as if they're good enough to make that World Series, in my eyes anyway, and I'm let down. So I've been a little cautious about it, but they are scary good.
Yeah, Julian, you kind of jumped the gun on me here because we're going Nats and Dodgers. That's kind of been the discussion all year. Are we forgetting about the defending champion Chicago Cubs, who went out and have won 14 of their last 17 since the All-Star break, who went out and got Jose Quintana, best lefty on the market, who went out and got Justin Wilson, a very good lefty out of the bullpen, and got a backup catcher in Alex Avila for to tandem with the youngster Wilson Contreras. Are we forgetting about these guys who were so good just a year ago?
You can't afford to forget about those guys. I mean, the Chicago Cubs, reigning champions, pretty much all the reasons I was just listing earlier, because of the fact that they were so active at the deadline, and they're starting to hit their stride. They've been as successful as he's mentioned since the All-Star break. In my mind, they're the only team in the National League that can stand up to the LA Dodgers. In fact, maybe even all of baseball. You know what? I'm kind of with you. I can't think of anyone in the American League who would really give the Dodgers a scare in a World Series game. Boston, New York, I don't know. The Dodgers are head and shoulders above everybody else in the MLB right now.
Matt, what do you think about the Cubs playing a lot better, have taken over the NL Central once again, where they belong on top, so to speak, taking over for the Brewers? What do you think? How do you think they handled the deadline?
I think they did enough. I think, to your point of the hot streak, the reality of the situation is the Nationals and Dodgers have huge leads in their division. That NL Central is tight, man, and the Cardinals can pitch and the Brewers can hit. It's kind of a shame because the Rockies and Diamondbacks are having such good seasons, but we're not talking about them because the Dodgers are so far in front. That's who's second and third in the West. In the Central, it's the Brewers and Cards, and they're not too far back. And I think I like the Nationals' chances better at the Dodgers than I do the Cubs. But I think they got the championship pedigree. They've been there. Joe Madden seems cool, calm, and collected as always. I was watching an interview today. He said he likes Wilson's stuff. He always has. You mentioned it. They got somebody that now can kind of take the edge off Contreras, who's already caught 94 games this year, or played in 94 games this year. Last year he only played in 76. So, they got somebody to supplement him. But I still like the Nats as opposed to the Cubs. I really don't think that that either of them are really going to give the Dodgers that big of a scare. I think the Nationals can. I don't think it's going to come from the Cubs.
Well, I think this team, to the surprise of many, were under 500 at the break. People were thinking, what is going on with the Cubs? And now what we've seen, what they've done since the break, I think it's just a classic case of championship hangover. Look, they made some very good moves. They went out and gotten Quintana, who's a great starter. And you think about that playoff rotation. If Arrieta can get healthy and get anything, even half of his old self, plus you got Lester, who's proven time after time in the playoffs, he has what it takes. Now you have Quintana. And if you look at what they did last year, they brought in Aroldis Chapman, obviously. Now Justin Wilson is no Aroldis Chapman, but that was what put them over the top. That gave Madden a lot of flexibility with his bullpen. He might have abused it, honestly, in the World Series in Game 6 and Game 7, but we don't need to get on that right now. But the fact that they brought in Wilson, a guy who can close, and they already have Wade Davis, that bullpen's looking pretty good. But the biggest thing, in my opinion, for the Cubs is that they got over themselves. They won. They brought a World Series to Chicago for the first time in over 100 years, and I think it's only natural to get off to a slow start. It might have lasted a little longer than people expected, but when they were down 5.5 games to the Brewers after the All-Star break with the deadline coming up, I think something just clicked for them, and now they are on a roll. And I think y'all are both saying the Nationals have a better chance to dethrone the Dodgers. Well, I'm saying the Nationals have never been out of the first round. We're talking about the defending champions.
I said the Cubs.
I think anyone that throws the Dodgers, it's Chicago.
I mean, the Nationals probably play them tough, but no, you know what? I'm with you on that. I think the Cubs, just because of the fact they've gone to the finals before, they've gotten over their hurdles. They're starting to play really well. That championship pedigree, you cannot sleep on that in the postseason. I mean, even like I've mentioned before, like I've seen these great LA Dodgers teams, well, pretty decent, at least in my eyes, over the last few years. 2 NLCS teams over in the last 4 or 5 years make it that far, and they run into some really good teams who have that championship pedigree, that finals pedigree. The Cubs have that. If there's any team that could match up against the Dodgers, it should be the Chicago Cubs.
Matt, any final thoughts on the National League before we head out to the American League?
No, I think you guys have about hit the nail on the head here. I think, clearly it's going to come down to the Cubs, Nats, Dodgers. At least the Nats and the Dodgers. And the Cubs, if they continue this hot streak, I think you guys have pretty much hit the nail on the head.
That being said, let's head out to the American League and let's get this over with. The Houston Astros still have 10 games on every other team in the American League. But, guys, it was a quiet Monday for them. I want to hear y'all's thoughts first before I go off on my rant. Julian, we'll start with you. What did you think about the Astros pretty much standing pat? They did bring in Francisco Liriano from the Blue Jays for Nori Aoki and an outfield prospect, Teoscar Hernandez. What did you think about, A, that deal, and B, the lack of other deals?
So we look at the NL where the Dodgers are way ahead of everybody, and instead of just being content with their team, they say, you know what, we need that last, hammer in the nail to really assure ourselves that we're a contending team and we can go out and beat all these other teams. They go out and they get a Yu Darvish, which is the right thing to do. And then you parallel that with a team that's been pretty much been the best team in the American League for most of the year in the Houston Astros, who not a lot of people picked, understandably, to really be this good in the year. They have an opportunity to do the same thing in the American League, and they don't do it. I mean, you probably feel a world of disappointment because of your fandom, but I have to say, as an outsider looking in, I would be disappointed as well. Francisco Liriano, I get it that he's, maybe a fourth or fifth pitcher on a rotation, but that's not nearly enough. And I think the Astros could have probably done better with some more moves. I think if you're a team that's trying to be a contending squad, I get it. You have a bit of more clout and a bit more room above everybody else. But it's always assuring as a fan to see that your team really cares about being in it, and they go out and they get a really big piece to stamp that in. I think the lack of activity puts them at risk of, say, hey, something happens in the middle of the year, they start losing a few games, and a few other teams start catching up to them in the American League. Let's just say, this was an opportunity for the Astros to really show that, hey, you know what? Maybe fine. You know what? People saying, you know what? They weren't supposed to be in this position to say whatever you want. But I think if you find yourself in a position where you're way above everybody and you can establish yourself as the contender in your league, why not make that happen? I'd be very disappointed.
Matt, what do you think about the Astros situation?
Julian, they're already the contender in their league, though, and I think you were getting to it. If the Dodgers don't go out and do what they do, right? Perfect's the enemy of good here. What's the real glaring hole in the Astros team right now? Maybe Jay can speak a little better to it, but from a general perspective, they got a great staff. I think it's the injuries. I think if Springer, Correa, McCullers, I think if those guys aren't injured, I think the team morale's a little bit higher. I don't think that there was a move really that needed to be made for them. I guess Britton definitely would have shored things up, but they got such a big lead in the AL anyway. They can hit, they can pitch. Giles is good enough. I mean, Jake, what was the move to be made?
I think there's a complex answer and there's a simple answer. And I think, look, the rotation has been phenomenal up to this point in the season, but they're guys that are raised question marks come October when you're basically looking at a 5-game series that will define your season. You have Dallas Keuchel, who was phenomenal, easily the Cy Young until he got hurt, and now he's had 1.5 starts, currently in his second start since returning from the DL, and they've been disastrous. You have Lance McCullers, who's an all-star, untouchable, especially at home first half of the season. In July, his ERA was near 9, and now he's on the DL with back discomfort, which I think is honestly, look, you've been struggling. You've never thrown this many innings. Take a break more than anything. Then you have guys like Mike Fiers, who started off very poorly and then had 2 great months. And then yesterday kind of got back to his old tricks of very bad timing, giving up a lot of the long ball. And then you have guys like Brad Peacock, who's 9-1, who has a sub-3 ERA. It's guys like Fiers and Peacock. Are you really going to throw them out there in a Game 3 or a Game 4 of an ALDS when you really haven't seen them perform that well outside of a 1.5, 2-month stretch? That worries me. I'll tell you what. That gives me nightmares just thinking about. Then you have Colin McHugh, who's made 1 start all season, and you don't know what he has in the tank after that very mysterious, questionable arm that sidelined him for the first half plus of the season. So I think you definitely could have added a starter. And then the bullpen, which has been very good on paper for the majority of the season. Their ERAs actually climbed up each month, and it was the worst in the American League, I believe, in the month of July. Giles, although it doesn't feel like it, has been money, has the best save percentage in the American League. He allows a lot of traffic, I think, personally. Plays with a lot of fire. Hasn't been burned too much yet, but I hope that doesn't happen in October. Meanwhile, some of the other guys, Chris Davinsky, an all-star out of the bullpen, phenomenal. But he's already thrown so many innings as that relief ace guy who comes in the 6th, 7th innings and does 3 innings of work multiple times a week. You got Will Harris, who was an all-star last year. He was on the DL, came back through 1 inning, and went directly back to the disabled list. That's concerning. So I think the pen could have used help as well. Guys, look, I can rant about this all night if I wanted to. I change my mind 10 times a day on whether the Astros completely screwed up or if they, in fact, did the right thing. The question is really, at what price do you want to go all in on 2017 when the window is open for many years to come? I know they had a guy, Kyle Tucker, outfielder who's 20 years old, who was untouchable. I'm sure a bunch of teams were calling about him. Lunau was unwilling to give up his prospects. He did a couple years ago when he brought in Gomez and Mike Fiers, like I said earlier, and it did not work. He brought in Scott Kazmir, and it did not work. So I get why he might be gun-shy, but Lunau said afterwards that he tried to make trades, and they just didn't work. And I think what this all comes down to, you guys, is other teams are jealous of the Astros. I don't want to sound too homer, but I really feel like if you have a team in the American League that has a 10-game lead on everybody else, and they have one of the best farm systems in all of baseball, why would you want to help them? Why would you want to make that trade? You guys agree or disagree with it?
That just sounds really interesting to hear. You'd be like, oh, everyone's so jealous of the Houston Astros because they don't necessarily want to help them because they have all that. What, you don't want any of their prospects? You don't want to I don't know. That sounds kind of – I want to go contrarian against you just because I can't stand to see you too happy about your Houston teams. I don't think
I'll ever be happy, but continue.
I think that's that notion that you don't want to help a team because you're so jealous of them. I think that's kind of ridiculous. In pro sports, if there's a deal to be made, there's a deal to be made. And you know what? In Houston's case, they found they weren't able to make the moves they were able to make. Well, Liriano seems to be enough for them as a 4th or 5th starter in Houston. But no, I think that's kind of ridiculous. I wouldn't say that, teams are jealous of them. I just think no deals were there to be made.
Hear me out. Let's start with you, Darvish, because this is kind of more obvious one. Darvish to the Astros was never going to happen. You can quote me on that. That was never going to happen. The Rangers are not going to ship off their ace to the Houston Astros, their biggest division rival who's dominating the division right now. The only way the Rangers would ever ship off Darvish is if they knew they were putting a huge dent in the Astros prospect core, which was obviously never going to happen because the Astros aren't going to give their best prospects in turn to their biggest rival in the division, the Texas Rangers.
Isn't that a different story, though? I mean, like, if you're talking about the Dodgers or some NL team in that same situation, maybe it's a different story. But yeah, of course, because it's their biggest rival, they're not going to do that.
Look, I think Darvish to the Dodgers, I'm guessing that the price that the Rangers were asking for from the Dodgers was substantially less than it was from Houston. A, because they're the rivals. B, because they're in the same division. C, because I think you could argue that Darvish loses a little bit of value going to the National League where he has to pick up a bat every 5 days. But also, I think the Astros farm system is so deep that even if their number 8, number 9 prospect is better than another organization's number 2 or number 3, it doesn't matter because it's the art of negotiation. It's a matter of fact, like, I'm not even taking one of their top 5 prospects. Even though this guy's better than that other guy, I'm not making that move with them. I honestly think that played a role in why the Astros did not get a deal done with the Rangers, with the Orioles, with the Tigers, with anybody. I honestly think that's what came into play.
Look, we'll never know. I think the combination of seeing what the Dodgers did and the Astros being a little nicked up, I think has everybody in their feels a little bit. If you think there's something deeper with the farm league and all that stuff, that's not for me to say. I don't know.
Jake Leapin, just paranoid, man.
That's entirely true. I don't know if it's true about this topic, but it's absolutely true. Well, Dallas Keuchel came out and said we're disappointed. We're more than disappointed that nothing got done. Meanwhile, he had to run his mouth, and now he's in line for the loss here against Tampa Bay. Not really the point of the story. The Astros did not have any dire needs. Even with 2 of the top 6 or 7 MVP candidates in the league on the DL right now, and Carlos Correa and George Springer, not to mention another all-star Lance McCullers, I still don't think there was anything that they had to do. Otherwise, they'd be completely screwed. They still should have home field advantage throughout, barring a disastrous finish to the season. But I just don't think other teams are afraid of them anymore. I think they had a chance to put themselves over the top like Chicago did last year with Aroldis Chapman, and they chose not to. Well, they failed to do so, whether they tried or not. And other teams aren't afraid. And one of those teams that seemingly was just jumped the gun way earlier than I thought they would in terms of the trade deadline and becoming buyers is the New York Yankees. Went all in.
Yep. Going out and getting Sonny Gray. They had already done a lot of their work early on, but I mean, we've been talking about this for the last few episodes. I mean, the Yankees looked as if they were in on Sonny Gray, and they end up getting him another solid arm for their rotation. That's a team that, you know what's crazy? Dave Dombrowski, the Boston Red Sox, look at all these moves. I don't know whether he was saying it tongue-in-cheek or not. He's saying with all these moves the Yankees are making, they're establishing themselves as the Golden State Warriors of baseball. Like I said, that's kind of, I don't know about that. That being said, the New York Yankees, that's a team that realizes, hey, you know what? We're in a unique position where maybe we weren't supposed to go as far as we were supposed to go, but we are in it now. Why not make the move? Also, they have the blessing of being the New York Yankees and having a massive payroll and, always shooting their shot whenever possible. Another basketball reference. So good on the Yankees for making their shot. I think it's going to be one of those situations where the AL East is going to go down to the wire. Though both the Yankees and Red Sox will make the playoffs, but in terms of making that division, the Yankees are going to make the Red Sox sweat. I know, unfortunately, the Yankees lost today. The Red Sox game just got postponed due to weather. But that's going to be a very close division to follow in the next few weeks.
Matt, what did you think of the Yankees' moves?
I like the Sonny Gray acquisition. I think they already got a good staff. I think the fact that they were able to get him, I was looking at the Google Doc earlier, does this make them front runners in the AL East? I think that says a little more about the difficulty of the AL East. The fact that Gray does not make them the front runners, in my opinion. I think the Red Sox, they got a good staff too, and I think the Rays are fighting, and even the Orioles, they've said that they're not giving up, and they're all in too. So I think that kind of is going to chip away at the Yankees being able to take away, run away with the division or anything like that. But I like the Gray move. Julian said it. They got the resources. The flowers were blooming a little earlier than they thought. And if you have the resources to do it, why not go ahead and pull the trigger?
I think it's a little ironic that we were all discussing early on this year when the Yankees were doing so well, like, wow, they finally decided to stop being buyers for rentals and older veteran players and started rejuvenating the farm system. They finally paid off. They finally had an above-average farm system, and they were reaping the benefits of that this year. Then they have one of the worst months in all of baseball and just resort directly back to their old ways of buying and buying and buying. And look, Sonny Gray's no old-timer, and they'll have control over him for after this year, I believe. Todd Frazier, again, another veteran guy, but they stole him right out of the claws of Boston. So I think I can't really get angry at that move from them. I just think that they're doing all this a year early, but with first place like so close in sight, the Red Sox did not put them away when they had the chance. The AL East is going to be so fun to watch down the stretch. Let's see here. You have the Red Sox. Like the Yankees always say, we made those moves. The Red Sox added Eduardo Nunez. They bolstered their pen. Cleveland bolstered their pen. Even Tampa Bay added a bat and Lucas Duda to their lineup. A lot of these American League teams made moves at the deadline. Is nobody afraid of the Astros? And should they even be afraid of the Astros?
No. I mean, to use the cliche answer to start, I mean, baseball, anything could happen in professional sport. But if I know for sure, if there's one team who I know really isn't afraid because of how they stack their team and having guys like Chris Sale, the Boston Red Sox, in my mind, like I said, they're going to make the playoffs whether they win the division or they end up as a wild card. I still don't want to face them in any case. The Yankees, I know of guys like Aaron Judge, they've kind of hit that lull in the year, but that's a young team that, they're playing with house money at this point. Maybe that's a team you're not necessarily going to be. They're playing with no fear as well. Here's the thing about Houston, though, and this kind of goes back to what I was trying to explain with the LA Dodgers and Chicago Cubs and having that championship and that playoff mindset. Houston, they're still a relatively young team. They've been the best in baseball. That playoff is a completely different animal. And you're really going to see teams like a Boston, teams like Cleveland even, who have been through this before, and they're going to stand out and they're going to end up being those better teams in the playoffs. And Houston, as much as they're going to get a really good chance to go far in that playoffs are a different animal. So if you're Boston or you're Cleveland, you're not afraid of Houston because you've been through the playoffs before. And if you go up in a series against them as good as they've been, you're not necessarily going to be scared. So to answer that, no, I wouldn't be scared.
I do want to point out that the Astros did make the playoffs in 2015.
Oh, no, they've made the playoffs before. It's just a matter of them going far. It's not a question of making the playoffs. It's a question of how far you get.
Fair
That's
enough.
not a team you're going to see in the ALCS year in, year out. That's not a team you're looking at.
Royals on the verge, 5 games. The Royals, by the way, another team who are buyers at the deadline. I forgot to mention them. Matt, do you think the AL is as wide open as Julian?
I do. I think the Astros, Keuchel coming out and saying what he did shows a little bit, too, of the fact that they maybe don't have enough belief in themselves to get it done. I don't think that's ever a good sign either. And I think that the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Indians recently, teams that have been there, I think, look, all you got to do is get in. The MLB postseason is a wild show come October, and I think for the teams that have been there, I think they know that. Hitting's going to get them there, pitching's going to help them advance. And, yeah, I think it is that wide open.
We've seen wild card teams win that one-game scenario, do or die, and then make a lot of noise afterwards. You guys don't seem to be afraid of the Astros. I'm afraid of the Astros, as in I'm afraid they're going to lose. Red Sox were my pick for the World Series before the season began. I think it is very wide open. The Astros have been a 500 ball club since the All-Star break, 9-8, but on the verge of losing now in a home series to Tampa Bay, one of those teams that is very much in the It should be interesting. I mean, look, they do have Correa and Stringer on the shelf, and those are 2 phenomenal talents that you don't just find anywhere. Basically, I wouldn't be surprised either way by the Astros, but I get other teams rising up to the challenge, trying to narrow that gap, even if they don't get the number 1 seed, taking on the Astros in the playoffs. I think it's a good move by GMs around the American League. We've been talking about the trade deadline and in the aftermath, but the fact of the matter is, guys, that was only the July trade deadline. We still have the August waiver deadline. Teams can put players on revocable waivers and then still make trades if that player should clear waivers. And a couple of guys, very notable ones, got put on there today. That is Justin Verlander, whose name came up a lot at the deadline, as well as Giancarlo Stanton. Do you guys think there's a chance that either of these guys ends up moving?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. I've in my mind got teams like the Yankees and the Dodgers, who I think could have probably gone after those guys. They've already shored up their teams and they've gotten players that they've wanted. And not to mention both of those guys, they cost a ton of money. Obviously, they're big names. But Verlander is a guy who's going to be commanding almost $50 million between the next 2 seasons. Giancarlo Stanton's making $14.5 million this year. That salary jumps up to about 25 next year. Basically, in order to make these deals happen, obviously Detroit and Miami respectively will have to retain some salary. But I don't know if the teams out there that really would want these guys are going to be willing to go out and fetch for them. I don't know if they've got the resources to get these guys. I don't know. I kind of see them kind of staying put.
Yeah, I don't see either of them moving as well. And I think the teams that – I think if they were going to go and deals were going to be made on them, they would have already happened. I think the teams that have already made their cases have made them, like the Dodgers. I don't know. Maybe the Astros could go and get Verlander. Not that they would, but I'm saying if they're the only team left that maybe had left something on the table at the deadline, I don't see them in the need for Verlander and for Stanton. And as Julian mentioned, with the financial side of it, I don't see anybody wanting to take that on.
I don't know if it's just me. Maybe it's the fact that it's just the name Justin Verlander. But you were asking that question. If you're an AL East, if you're an AL team, are you scared of the Houston Astros? If they go out and they get a Justin Verlander or Giancarlo Stanton, I don't know if I'm less afraid, but I'm definitely looking at them like, whoa, wait a minute. They got that guy on their team? I'm a little shook at least.
Yeah, I don't see either of these guys moving, provided that let me say this. If one of them were going to move, either the Marlins or the Tigers would have to put up a lot of that money up front. Mm-hmm. But I don't think they would even put these guys on revocable waivers. I mean, we're talking about two faces of the franchise here. They wouldn't put them on revocable waivers if they weren't at least considering trading them. This gives them the option, or they don't have to. They can keep the player if they so choose. I'd keep an eye on Verlander. And I say this because with all the heat that Lunau's been getting from the fans and the media, and now Dallas Keuchel and some of the players, I think he will be picking up the phone and at least giving a call on Justin Verlander, just to see what exactly the money situation would be and what their asking price is on prospects. Because look, Detroit wouldn't be willing to. They wouldn't have put him on the waivers if they weren't willing to listen. And if there's enough pressure from multiple camps for Jeff Lunau, I think he at least gives a call. I'd keep an eye on Verlander, but I'm with you guys. I think they both ultimately stand pat. Any last thoughts, either of you, on the MLB trade deadline before we move on to our favorite game, Big Deal or No Deal?
While we're on the subject of baseball, I mean, this isn't necessarily trade deadline related. Last week we spoke about the Hall of Fame class. Obviously, Tim Raines getting in. Bud Selig got in, and the few Expos fans who were there booed him. I don't have to explain too much as to why Bud Selig got there. But one person I did forget to shout out, journalist Claire Smith, who was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. She was the first female beat reporter. She got to cover the Yankees up in the 70s. I got to meet her a few months ago at Syracuse University. I just want to express congratulations to her on being inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame this past weekend. A pioneer for reporters in the game and a legend class act at that. So congratulations to Miss Claire Smith.
Absolutely a pioneer for both women and African Americans. Matt, any last thoughts on baseball before I move on?
I think we about touched on it. Good to see Pudge and Bagwell get in and achieve immortality.
Yes, sir.
Guys, I know we all probably grew up watching, so to piggyback off the Hall of Fame talk, more than excited to see those guys get in.
Been watching a ton of Pudge and Bagwell videos in my downtime at MLB Network. I've seen Pudge hold up the ball after the NLDS win 1,000 times. That video never gets old. All right, guys, let's move on to Big Deal or No Deal, and we're going to stick it in Baltimore right with you, Matty Ice, and that is Colin Kaepernick. What is going on here? Colin Kaepernick thought maybe he could come in as a backup for the Ravens, Joe Flacco, with an injury, but now not so fast. Matt, let's start with saying, what's your version of this story and what happened?
Well, I think that the Kaepernick talk has more to do with dissatisfaction than Ryan Mallett than Flacco being injured. In light of the Flacco injury, right? Mallett's been getting a lot of first-team reps, and the Ravens just aren't sold on him being the guy, and you have someone in Colin Kaepernick that's available. Why not start the conversation? Well, of course, what comes with the conversation is Colin Kaepernick's recent history, and that's what's factoring into all of it. ESPN wrote something saying that the move, Ozzie Newsome, the Ravens general manager, Coach John Harbaugh, approved of the move, liked Kaepernick, and that it was getting blocked at the ownership level. Then Ozzie Newsome comes out with a statement. I don't know which one came first, but regardless, Ozzie Newsome comes out saying that no, that's not the case. Ownership has not blocked the move. So basically, it sounds like a little bit of he said, she said. And at the end of the day, Colin Kaepernick, he's not a Raven yet.
Exactly. So if ownership's not blocking the move, what is blocking the move exactly?
That's a good question. If I had to venture a guess, I think it's a business, and I think that ownership's probably just making sure that they're dotting their I's, crossing their T's, doing their due diligence, and thinking what's going to be the repercussions of bringing in Colin Kaepernick. Is he worth it? Is he worth what's coming in? So I think it's a little bit of the Ravens covering themselves, saying it's not ownership. But I think you're right. I think if you're going to peel back the layers, Steve Bisciotti, the owner of the Ravens, he benefits a little bit in this area from the halo effect because the Redskins are down the road, and Dan Snyder, some not so nice things are frequently said about him in this area. So Bisciotti's very much someone that's in tune with the people that are Ravens fans, with the community. He has a very good reputation down here, and I think it's more about if I had to venture a guess, it's not so much about the specifics of Colin Kaepernick and his beliefs, ideologies, his past actions, as more to do with what are the fans going to say? How am I going to be perceived if I take him on?
Right. And I think that's an important business decision to factor in. Yet at the same time, I'm not suggesting that puts us in the category of no deal, because if the fans are truly that, or if the fans are willing to get rid of their season tickets, like the reports say, because they might sign a backup quarterback at a steal price, I'm sure, who's clearly the best backup on the market. And look, I'm no stranger to Ryan Mallett's struggles. He had some run with the Texans, didn't go well. Guy has a cannon, but accuracy is an issue, not to mention he can't even set his alarm clock correctly. Look, when I first saw this company, I was scratching my head a little bit because, look, I mean, Colin Kaepernick does have a good arm, but I think he'd be best utilized in a run-first type of system, or at least an equal pass, equal running type of situation, which is obviously not what Joe Flacco and the Ravens are about at this current juncture. But it's a big deal if you are about to bring this guy in finally after this whole circus, and now your fans are the ones preventing you from doing it. This whole saga continues, and it is just sickening to me. It's a huge deal. Julian, what do you think?
What's funny about all of this? We've seen a whole bunch of these teams, maybe they obviously they go out, they don't really say anything, and we're getting that sentiment that no team wants Colin Kaepernick. And the sentiment about it is that you bring in Colin Kaepernick, there's going to be all this attention drawn to a backup quarterback, and yeah, your fans are going to be, negative about it and blah, 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 whatever. And now we're seeing, I mean, Seattle did to a certain extent as well, and they ended up signing, Austin Davis. Baltimore expresses interest in a guy. There's all this hope that kind of goes around thinking, hey, maybe this is the team that does it. And now they've looked at like 2 or 3 other quarterbacks in place of Colin Kaepernick. They had the latest guy is Aaron Murray, who was at like Georgia for years, and I forget where he was backing up at like Kansas City, and now he's a guy who was being looked at. And the more they keep looking at guys and bypassing Colin Kaepernick, the more vitriol I see against the Baltimore Ravens. So in this weird way, while I understand there will definitely be some fans who are going to be very upset about Colin Kaepernick being there, and that's a whole other story in itself. It's almost like the only way the Baltimore Ravens can save face for PR is if they actually sign the guy and keep him on their roster. It's kind of like this weird, ironic thing that's kind of happened in this place. But I'm with Jake on the fact that the Baltimore Ravens as a fit for Colin Kaepernick, I'm not really sure if that is. I mean, Colin Kaepernick was one of the poster boys of that option offense, that run style, and there's nothing about the Baltimore Ravens that screams, running offense. And in fact, you know what? I kind of cringe for him a little bit. The AFC North is like the toughest division in the NFL. I just see him getting pounded week in, week out. If he was getting reps against like Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, and well, we don't need to talk about Cleveland. But anyway, Colin Kaepernick in a Baltimore Ravens uniform at this point, like Baltimore's in such deep doo-doo with what they've started. It's as if the only way they can really save face is by signing Colin Kaepernick. And not to mention, I mean, you look at what they've done in the past. I mean, people keep bringing up how they've signed like Dante Starworth, and the Ray Rice saga was another thing they've had to deal with as well. And you know who's really looking embarrassing out of all of this? Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis. I don't know if you guys have seen the little back and forth skirmish with him and Shannon Sharp, another former Baltimore Raven, and him going on after on Facebook saying, hey, do what you got to do in your and don't let too many people know what you do in your private life. Ray Lewis is telling Colin Kaepernick, don't let too many people know what you're doing in your private life. Dude, you got to stand down. Ray Lewis, my man, you are one of the scariest athletes I've seen, but my dude, you have to stand down on this. This is an absolute big deal. this is turning into a bigger joke day by day. I mean, Colin Kaepernick should be on an NFL roster. Baltimore's just making this a bigger mess the longer this goes out. Pretty much at this point, as upsetting as it would have to be, they just pretty much have to just go up to a podium and be like, hey, we're not going to sign Colin Kaepernick and try to put this to bed. Because the longer they just let this subside and they keep looking at different quarterbacks, the worse this is going to get for them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Julian. First of all, with Ray Lewis, I mean, we've had Ray Lewis and Michael Vick tell Colin Kaepernick to stick to sports. I mean, you're going to listen to the dogfighter and the murderer, for God's sakes, is ridiculous. All the guy did was take a stand and raise millions of dollars for charity for orphans. God, what a terrible guy. We've already discussed that before. Look, I agree with you that, like, what we both said up front, it's not the ideal fit with Kaepernick's style of play, but you look at the market for quarterbacks. And I mean, quarterbacks are like the rarest breed in all of humanity. There are only 12 or 14 guys who are very good at it. And you take this guy, and it's not he might be the best one available or he's probably the best one available. He is the best one available. Furthermore, he's way better than a lot of people who are already currently employed. The list goes on and on. Scott Tolzien, Kellen Clemens, I could name a bunch of these guys who are
Kellen Clemens is still in the league?
Colin Kaepernick, who are never going to a Super Bowl. And the fact remains, he's unsigned for this reason or that reason. He's vowed to not do the kneeling anymore, but he's a free agent, and no one will take him. Matt, what's your thoughts on all this mess?
I think a part of it is the fact that this part of the process has gotten this public too. In that same ESPN report, I saw that another team had kind of gone through the same progression with Kaepernick, and that got blocked at the ownership level. I'd love to know who that team was. So I think this is necessary. If Colin Kaepernick, right, the only way to get signed is to talk to a team and have people know about it. And I think part of what's going on is this is really the first anybody has heard of it. But I agree with Julian. I think the point maybe you're trying to make, or maybe I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but one thing I took away from you was the longer this goes on, the more it clearly is less about Colin Kaepernick's ability and more about you worrying about how it's going to be, how your franchise is going to be perceived. And I don't think that is good for the Ravens.
I'll allow that comment. I didn't say that exactly, but no, I'll allow that. No, you're completely in the right with that. And just all these teams, just because they don't want all this attention around Colin Kaepernick, a guy who stood up for, I'm trying to remember who exactly said this, but he basically just believed in simple truths. Hey, you know what? We shouldn't have cops going out and killing random civilians, especially, random unarmed black teenagers or black civilians, just every day. Just simple truths. And all of a sudden, that just gives NFL owners reason to pause. I get it. The Ravens kind of went out and they were like, hey, you know what? That's not actually happening. But I don't know. I had that feeling that there's some discord in these franchises where maybe the coaching staff is showing interest in a guy. I mean, there's no doubt players have no problem playing with Colin Kaepernick. Terrell Suggs went out and said, hell yeah, I would love to play with Colin Kaepernick. You had guys on the Seattle Seahawks who were rivals with the San Francisco 49ers at the height of that rivalry. Colin Kaepernick there, who had no problem with Colin Kaepernick stepping into their locker room and being a backup to Russell Wilson. It's not the players. I don't think it's the coaching staff. There are higher powers above my own pay grade, for sure, who have a say in this matter.
And one thing I'll add is that Ozzie Newsome, the Ravens general manager, and the coach John Harbaugh are guys that have the trust of ownership. Ozzie Newsome's a general manager kind of that marches to the beat of his own drum anyway with some of the decisions he makes and some of the draft picks. So at the end of the day, if he thinks Colin Kaepernick is going to help his football team, he's going to make it known.
Yeah, it's honestly, there's a whole lot going on here. We got to move on because we're running out of time. How's this for timing, by the way? Jerry Jones today saying that if any Cowboys refuse to stand during the national anthem, they will be cut. Julian, is this a big deal or no deal?
It's a big deal, but he's not the first coach, member of a front office to have said that. He's just adding to that long list of guys who, in light of what Colin Kaepernick did, saying, hey, if you do that, you're off this team. I just think it's so ridiculous how, something that got no attention before what Colin Kaepernick did and all because of one reporter just happening to notice what happened, this ends up turning into a big deal. This shouldn't be a big deal, but I mean, goodness, the fact that Jerry Jones has to go out there and turn this into some kind of big thing, and it's just disappointing to me. Unfortunately, I'm not an NFL player. I can't go out and try to stand to my boss like that. I mean, we all know how it is for an NFL player, vastly underpaid in comparison to a few other guys in the professional sports lexicon and the grueling sport they play, and they have families at the end of the day. So to a certain extent, I do understand why some of them can't really voice themselves out, but which makes Colin Kaepernick's cause so much more brave than it is. The amount of bravery for him to do that, a guy who is comfortable in his NFL career, using his platform to stand out against these issues, and he's getting vilified for it. And he's getting blacklisted. Yeah, I said it. He's getting blacklisted in the NFL. I don't think there should be any question about that. It's just really disappointing.
Matt, what do you think on Jerry's comments?
I don't think it surprises me one bit. I'm not sure if the America's team, mantra has any play in it at all. I think at the end of the day, I think it's a business decision for any franchise, and he's making the position known, right, wrong, indifferent. You're not going to be able to say that you were caught off guard by it. But I do think it's a big deal. I agree. I think the fact that Colin Kaepernick still does not have a job, I think it says way more about the politics of the NFL than it does Colin Kaepernick's ability. And I think the fact that now owners are coming out and saying it, I think it furthers that narrative, and I do think it's a big deal.
Julian, we touched on this last week, and when it all comes down to it, I think Jerry Jones needs to shut his big, stupid mouth. What are you doing, Jerry? Come on, man. Last week you cut a guy who allegedly stole a Twinkie, and it wasn't even him. He was in a different state. Now you're saying if players decide to take a knee that you're going to cut them. What about the guy who is domestically abusing his wife? What about the guy who is abusing his girlfriend? Those guys are fine. I mean, come on. Can you imagine if Dak Prescott took a knee? No way in hell Jerry Jones is cutting that guy loose. The guy needs to shut up and be a normal owner. He makes the Baltimore owners look really good right now, Jerry Jones does. Huge deal. Next topic, I'm getting heated. This is actually a doozy. Jamal Adams, first-round pick, safety out of LSU for the New York Jets, at training camp in an interview with Roger Goodell in front of a bunch of media and fans, said that there's no perfect place other than a football field to die on in terms of a question on CTE. Julian, this sounds like a pretty big deal to me. What do you think?
It's a big deal, you dummy. Why would you say that? That was one of those things that just made me want to roll my eyes. Are you serious? In light of, have you been not paying attention for the last few years over how dangerous this sport can be? We're seeing the study with CTE, with what are the numbers? Like 99% of brains that were studied in a particular study all found to have had CTE. Are you serious right now? That is probably one of the most tone-deaf comments I've heard all year, including what Ray Lewis was saying. Like, come on. Like, Jamal Adams, so disappointing. And I know people may look at him and be like, oh, he's just a kid. He shouldn't say that. Oh, what's he going to say with Roger Goodell there? There are better ways to go about it. I mean, what's so wrong about sitting up there and being like, hey, you know what? I love this sport a lot, but I've also, looked at my future and just looked at and just realized how the trauma of head injuries, and I'm cognizant of that, but I also love this game and I think it's a great game to play. What's wrong with saying something along those lines? Being smart and realizing how dangerous this game is while also loving the benefits of it. What's wrong with just being smart as opposed to just, trying to impress a commissioner and a bunch of little kids and whoever else was at that fan forum and just being like, hey, the football field is a wonderful place to die. That sounds like something, in the old school. Maybe it's because I'm a very new school guy. I'm going to be a new school guy until my new school is old school. That sounds like something that, like, in the old school, you hear a guy say, you know what, the football field is a perfect place to die. And then after that, you say, hey, you know what, that's a guy I want to play with. That's a soldier I want to be around. No, with the risk attached to this game, not to mention we've heard stories of guys, not necessarily in the NFL, but people dying on football fields and being linked to CTE and people dying outside of that. It's such an irresponsible thing to say, and I know Adams tried to clarify that afterwards, but
yes, he did.
I think it was very irresponsible and dangerous.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. Thank you for pointing that out, Julian. Adams did try to clarify, saying he's just trying to say that he's passionate about the game. What concerned me more was the uproar from the fans who were in support of that statement. I think we're just on some treacherous waters here. Matt, what is your take on all of this?
Huge deal, but not because of what he said, but why he said it. You can call the comment tone deaf or he's trying to get a rise, but NFL players, I think, legitimately believe that. And I think you can't talk about the problem with addressing the psyche behind it. And I think these guys legitimately believe that. And I think if you're going to want to, I think what he said needs to be taken actually for what it was. And you got to address that side of things. Guys really think it says a lot about their toughness. And to your point of the old heads and stuff like that, they say back in my day, and we might scoff at that and say it's new school, it's this, it's that. But I actually think that's legitimately the problem, is that in light of the research, nothing's working. And I think you have to evaluate why. Why is it that you can come out with the statistics that show you how dangerous this is, yet the mentality doesn't change? And I think it's because it's something that's woven into the psyche of playing really any professional sport, but especially football.
I will say to that point, I will not say that it's not completely working. I think in the last few years where we've started to see some of that research come up, we're starting to see some guys say, you know what, hey, this sport isn't for me to play past my 30s. And we're starting to see guys retire. Like, remember Patrick Willis was like the baddest guy at his position. He retired early. The 49ers had another guy who was really good in his first year, and unfortunately I forget his name, but that's another guy who left. The Ravens just had an offensive lineman there. John Urschel just retired. We're starting to see guys who realize how dangerous the sport is, and they realize the benefits, and they've reaped what they've sown from it. They realize, hey, you know what? I'm more than just this football player. I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead at 26, 28, 29, and save my brain and save my body from further injury. There are guys there who are being smart, which makes this whole Jamal Adams thing so disappointing, because there's a bit of a precedent there. And I think you are right in the fact that there are guys who are definitely of that old school mindset, who believe that, you know what, the football field is also a place to die. They won't come out and say it as brashly as Jamal Adams did. But there are other players who feel the opposite way, and they are trying to protect themselves.
Julian, you're absolutely right. There are opposite ends of the spectrum here. You have guys who are saying dying on the football field will be an honor. Football is the only game that they know. There is no life without football. And there are guys who are retiring early because they're not willing to sacrifice their brain, sacrifice their body for what is merely, at the end of the day, whether sports fans want to say it or not, entertainment value. And I totally understand both sides, but I think for every guy who's retiring in his 20s, there's 10 or 20 guys like Adams who would rather die out on the field, or at least say that they would rather die out on the field. But I think this spectrum is what's ultimately going to lead to the NFL's downfall. You have guys saying, look, the game's not safe. You have that study showing CTE in 99% of brains of former NFL players. But you also have guys who are saying these new rules are lame. It's not in the spirit of the sport. We can't hit people anymore, blah, blah, blah. And the fact of the matter is how long can the NFL sustain itself when you have two camps that are so diametrically opposed? And that's why I think in 2050, I don't think the NFL will be here anymore. And if we're lucky, Roger Goodell will be in jail. Matt, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say I think the other camp's really going to have to get a lot bigger in number, and it's going to take a pretty big star to withdraw from the NFL, not somebody that's, kind of a no-name. But I think it's the psyche. I think it's woven in. I think the fact that, right, if I tell you something's going to harm you in the end and that doesn't elicit a change, well, then I think you have to challenge the belief. And I think the genuine belief amongst most NFL players is, I love this. This is who I am. This is what I do. They go in full well knowing the fact that some of them could end up like this, and they still decide to do it. I'd love to know what the number of NFL players would be if you were to ask him at the end, would you do it again?
Right.
If that number's anywhere north of 50, 60, 70%, I think, and I'd be more than willing to put money that it is. I think that's the problem.
Last point, because I know we only have so much time with this, to the point of the NFL dying out by the year 2050. You know what's going to end up happening around that time? We're going to see a ton of Aaron Judges play in the MLB, and everyone's going to look like that. I mean, think about it. A guy like Aaron Judge built like how he is playing Major League Baseball. And we're seeing all these kids who are playing all these different sports. They're playing basketball, football, soccer all at once. And they're saying, hey, you know what? Let me go cash out in MLB. Hey, you know what? I'm good enough to go play another sport. Like, I'm just going to throw out another sport there, hockey or soccer. The youth as well. And once that generation of NFL players dies out, those guys, those old school heads, they die out, how many of those young kids are going to come up and be like, hey, you know what? The NFL is the place I want to play in.
Yeah, I mean, let me answer that with another question of my own. Would you let your kid play football?
Nope, I wouldn't.
Yeah, I'd coach.
I'm with Julian on this one. No way in hell my kid's putting on pads. Not happening. You got baseball, you got basketball, maybe even some hockey. Not playing football, I'll tell you that.
I don't think I'm going to play football, no.
Speaking of basketball, it's wedding season in the NBA. Trevor Ariza just got married. Harrison Barnes just got married. And at that wedding, a little bit of drama. Steph Curry making fun of LeBron James doing that. Dan, I don't want to do it. We've all seen the workout video. And you see that, and it's funny, it's whatever, but then the camera moves, and oh no, Kyrie Irving laughing his ass off. Julian, what do you think about all this?
Harrison Barnes had a very lit wedding. That's what I think about it. No one thinks about that. That's Harrison Barnes' wedding. Okay. Kyrie Irving laughing at Steph Curry doing what he did. Steph Curry going out and saying, oh no, I wasn't mocking LeBron James, which, you know what? I kind of believe, you know what? I don't think he was necessarily going out of his way to say, you know, hey, you know, this is LeBron James. I'm going to make fun of him because I don't respect him. It was a really funny video. LeBron James, like a day after he loses the NBA Finals, goes into the gym, starts pumping iron, goes off. What, you didn't laugh at that? I thought that was hilarious, for sure. I get it, fine. You know, Kyrie Irving laughing at what's supposed to be who's supposed to be LeBron's biggest rival. But I also think this is just nothing bigger than what it is. The biggest winner in all of this, I have to drop a music reference because it's me. The biggest winner in all of this is T Grizzly, the rapper whose song is played in the original video and in the second one. Because this guy, I had no clue who this guy was. I don't think either of you guys knew who he was. But all of a sudden, because of LeBron James, this guy's getting play. Also, another topic that can be saved for another day. We need to talk about LeBron James's role as a you know, not wannabe, but like he's pretty much an A&R now. Basically, if this guy is plugging music and he's playing it on his Instagram story, there is a good chance that you're going to get it. I think it's because of him we ended up getting that Untitled Unmastered album by Kendrick Lamar. Like, LeBron James, you should consider a career in music, man.
Matt, it sounds like we need to get LeBron a copy of our NCC News intro remix, work in progress. Meanwhile, you have thoughts on this whole Steph Curry video and Kyrie enjoyment of said video?
Yeah, I mean, look, cat's out of the bag. I think we all know that these guys are friends as much as we like to believe they're adversaries on the court. I do think the timing, though, is poor. And I think that Steph Curry, it certainly doesn't help whatever's going on in Cleveland. And I'm sure LeBron, regardless, wasn't too happy to see, or once he saw it, he knew what the conversation was going to be. And it's the conversation that we're having exactly right now. I think it is a big deal. I think in light of what's going on, I think Kyrie Irving, you kind of have to know that if the phones are out and you're there with Steph Curry and all that stuff, it's a shame to say, right? Because he's just at his friend's wedding trying to have a good time. But look what one false move got him.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. It's a little childish, honestly. It's when you're like best friend growing up, you find out is talking to the girl you like behind your back. That's really what it is.
Oh, come on.
It would not have been worse for Kyrie. Julian, we talked about this last week. I said I think Kyrie will still be a Cavalier come opening night. You said no way. Now I'm leaning towards your side because that is an awkward conversation waiting to happen just on top of already the gigantic elephant in the room. It's just to see that. LeBron said he was heartbroken when he found out Kyrie wanted a trade. But to see that you getting made fun of go viral with the guy who just beat both of you, not just you, he beat both of you in the NBA Finals. Matt, I agree. Players are way too friendly in the NBA these days. I think all of the old timers would agree with both of us on that one. Case in point, LeBron giving Paul George a high five when he hit a buzzer beater in the middle of a heated playoff series. I mean, that's not what people want to see. They want to see people get in your face, Patrick Beverley, break your leg, and then refuse to help you up. That's what they want to see. So I'm not a fan of any of that buddy-buddy on different teams. Now, to do that against your own teammate, and not to mention, guys, Kyrie shouldn't be doing that to anyone. He's doing it to LeBron freaking James. We're talking about the guy who might be the best player in basketball, in the history of the sport when it's all said and done. Big deal, Kyrie. You really need to start thinking through the things you're doing. I'm not okay with this at all.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts on Kyrie?
Yeah, that's all we got on Kyrie, man.
Guys, we're running out of time. We're at about the hour 10, hour 15 mark. A few more items on the docket, but we'll have to scrap some. I want to talk about this, though. Allen Iverson, a no-show for the Big Three League. How do you guys feel about this? Matt, we'll start with you this time.
Was it a game or was it practice?
We are talking about the game.
Look, I have to be honest with you. I haven't been giving the 3-on-3 league much play, but I'm going to say it's a big deal because you only got 3 players. So if you're not showing up, who's filling in? You know, I mean, at some point, I think the bodies matter. I think Iverson, if he's not showing up, I think that's a big deal.
Especially with these old guys who don't have nearly the stamina that they used to. Julian, what do you think?
It should be a big deal because, I mean, look, I get it. This 3-on-3 league, I know not too many people have been paying attention to it. I don't have FS1, so I'm not able to watch any of these 3-on-3 games. I've seen some of the videos of like Steven Jackson going back and forth with Charles Oakley, but Allen Iverson is supposed to be one of, if not the marquee attraction of this 3-on-3 league. And for the fans that are actually paying for this product, that believe it or not, there are actually fans who pay to watch these games. They want to see Allen Iverson play. And if he's player coach, right? Yeah, if Allen Iverson's not playing and he just vanishes out of nowhere, I'm concerned about that if I'm a 3-on-3 fan. And, fine, I haven't been able to watch every game, but I wanted to see that league succeed. I wanted to see Chauncey Billups do his thing. And obviously the whole GM thing happened and he ended up sitting out and trying to, avoid attention to himself. But yeah, no, Allen Iverson, man, that's a big deal in my eyes. Allen Iverson, I want to see him play. Hopefully he gets back on that court real soon. And and think about it. You have all these people, in the NBA, if a guy doesn't show up, they have to respond to their general manager. You know who Allen Iverson has to speak with? Ice Cube. You got to deal with Ice Cube, man. Are you kidding me? You go on Ice Cube down your throat like, hey, why didn't you show up to the game? What's going on?
Hopefully that's the last Ice Cube impersonation for a while on Faceoff. I'm with you guys. I've tuned into a couple games here and there. It's really not my cup of tea, but it seems to be doing pretty well. It's pretty popular. It was a packed house at Jerry World down in Dallas where AI was supposed to show up. So clearly the tour is doing pretty well. I think it's ironic that the punishment for Allen Iverson missing a game is they're suspending him for another game. What are you solving exactly? What if the guy's trying to miss games, then what is making him miss more games going to teach him? Nothing.
You made him show up to practice.
That, I think, would get him on board. I think that's the solution. They should have made it mandatory practices instead of suspending him for games. Matt, thank you so much for joining us, man. It's always a pleasure. Great to see your face here on the Face-Off. Thanks for joining us.
Jake, Julian, thank you guys for having me. Love seeing you guys. Love to see what the progress is in this new house. And thank you for having me.
Matt,
we will absolutely be in touch. Matt, Julian, you and I will be in touch as well as soon as next week. As a matter of fact, we got another episode coming your way. But for now, for this week, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, all of you that do. Again, you can catch these YouTube lives. We also have Mixcloud and iTunes coming at you later the next day. Great material we've got, and it's only going to get better, I promise. Thanks for listening, as always. Signing off for Julian and Matt, I'm Jake Lapin. Have a great night.